Three, two, no. 3, 2, 1, go.
There you go.
Hey, my name is James Fox. I am the director and producer of the film The Phenomenon. I want to thank each and every one of you on Reddit, as well as the moderators, for giving me this opportunity to communicate directly with you guys. I'm sitting down here with my friend Jamie. He's sitting behind me, so when you see my eyes divert to him, you'll know I'm not just looking off into space. He's going to be asking the top 20 questions. So without further ado, let's get started. And I haven't rehearsed anything. I don't even know what the questions are.
Doesn't know what the questions are.
I've been really busy lately, so I've been like barely making appointments, and I'm preparing also for my next film, which is going to be taking place in Brazil on what many refer to as the Roswell of Brazil, the 1996 Varginha UFO incident.
Which, that's cool. That's for a different Reddit, right?
Yes, that's a different,
that's another one
fascinating.
altogether.
Yeah, I'll go in there my fourth
maybe
time.
Maybe they'll ask you about that. All right, the first question is from Zoloto Gold, and he or she asks, have you been told compelling evidence in confidence that cannot be released? Without going into detail, how explosive is that information if it turned out to be true, and what would it mean for humanity in its broadest sense?
So to answer your question, yes, I have been told about evidence that has not been released, and very specific evidence that I would love nothing more than to see released. I don't know what it would take. And I've had those things confirmed to me by Senator Harry Reid. Talked about some footage that I've heard about over the years. Like, I've interviewed military people who've personally handed said footage over to some unknown government agency, and of course it vanishes. But yes, I have heard about very specific stuff, recent stuff, that I would love to see get out there. The impact that would have, certainly would stop people like Neil deGrasse Tyson from making all these ridiculous comments, and I respect him tremendously. He's a very bright individual. He just does not know what he's talking about regarding the UAP stuff. He's like, why isn't it all blurry footage, and why is it not this? I'm like, they've been telling us that they have the goods, the 4K stuff. It just hasn't gotten released. They're all saying it exists. They've seen it. It's there. So I think the impact would be tremendous. I think it would force us, this reality would force us to see ourselves for who we really are. And if you look at interviews that I've done dating back 20 plus years, I've said that this would have a very unifying effect on humanity. And I believe that today. We would see ourselves for who we are as one race, one planet.
All right, question number 2.
Yes.
And this one's from No Guarantee 8278. One of the most compelling parts of the film, I imagine he's talking about Phenomenon, right, was Jacques' metamaterials, yet you kind of left us hanging. What does he have? Can someone describe the composition? Word on the street is that Valley has quite a few samples in his possession. I said Valley, whatever. I feel you could have an entire film based on this topic. This is often overlooked. If we truly have materials that can't be constructed on Earth, then that is the best possible evidence that we've been visited by otherworldly objects. Oh, and then they add, I would be remiss if I didn't compliment you on the film. In my opinion, the best one that I've seen in the UFO UAP genre. I hope more are coming soon.
Great question, and thank you for that. And yes, that was a tricky segment because, well, first of all, I got to share something that was taking place in the lab with Gary Nolan and Jacques Vallée, and he had all these samples that he'd collected over the years from around the world, and he was carrying them around the lab like this. And I said, Jacques, can you put them down? Like, what are you doing? And he goes, these things have a strange way of disappearing. Like, I'm not kidding you. He was walking around like this with them. It's like, I'm not letting these out of my sight. I don't think he went to the bathroom. I'm not kidding.
That's hilarious.
And we had a much more in-depth analysis, stuff that Gary Nolan had gone into greater detail on a number of aspects of their preliminary testing results. However, because of his connection with Stanford, we had to tone it down, and so we went back to the edit room and we toned it down, unfortunately. And my hands were tied. It is what it is. So we were lucky to get anything.
All right.
Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. Question number 3, and this is from I'm just going to say Barney's first name because I'm not going to say his last one. But they use these
funny names.
Funny names.
Yeah.
So Barney you know who you are. In past interviews, you've mentioned that that Alan Sandler and Robert Eminger, I'm probably not pronouncing
Emenager.
thank you, co-producers of the '74 documentary UFOs Past, Present, and Future, had seen authentic video footage of the alleged Holloman Air Force Base landing, which was intended to be used in the film. You said that Sandler was still in possession of copies of these 6mm rolls, or knew where to obtain them, in addition to video of an Atlas rocket launch at Vandenberg. Initially, you were pursuing these through Sandler and had offered up to $20,000 to do so. Given the importance of such evidence, are you still attempting to acquire these videos? And do you have any hope that they will be obtained and made public?
So Angela Joyner, who was involved with the Stephenville UFO incident of 2008, she was one of the journalists that broke that story. She unfortunately passed. Her and her husband got diagnosed with COVID, and neither one of them made it. I couldn't believe it. But she knew that I was in touch with Alan Sandler and Emenager in 2013, 2014, when I was just starting with the phenomenon. And back then it was called 701. And she's like, Alan's got some footage. I was like, well, that's funny, because I've been talking with Alan for some time now, and he hasn't told me about any of this stuff. She's like, oh yeah, he's got it. Anyway, long story short, I confirmed that he did have it, and he was going to sell it to me. I think it was either $20,000 or $25,000. And he was very weird about it, but he described it, and Emenager confirmed that it was a launch with an Atlas rocket at Vandenberg Air Force Base somewhere in the mid-'60s, and then it was given to them by the guy that ran Project Blue Book, Quintanilla. And at the last minute, he was asked not to use it in his movie, and it's two separate film canisters, 16mm. One was at close range, zoomed in with the rocket, and there were one or several objects zipping around, disc-shaped craft, zipping around the dummy warhead. And then there was another one that was further back, and they determined that was also captured the same thing from a different angle. So they completely eliminated the possibility of any lens flare or anything like that. It was confirmed intelligent objects that were flying along with this rocket. And Bob's like, yeah, I've seen it, and Alan saw it, and they definitely had it, no question about it. Put the money in an escrow account. We're going to go to his house, and he said the deal was, if it wasn't everything he said it was going to be, then we'd get the money back, and that would be that. I got this guy Larry, to put the money up, and it was about to, it was all go. And then all of a sudden, he's like, no, I can't do it. I said, well, you gave me your word. If I got the money, you'd do it. And everybody thought it was so weird that we had to put the money up first just to look at it, But that's why he wanted it. And then he just got really weird. He's like, well, I talked to my lawyers, and so anyway. But in the process of that whole thing, I was learning more and more about the Holloman Air Force Base incident. Obviously, I'd known about it through UFOs Past, Present, and Future, and Emenager had talked about it. And there's a guy named Paul Schartle that Emenager knew that ran Norton Air Force Base, where this film footage was originally processed. And Emenager wouldn't stop talking about it. Well, anyway, I brought this up with Alan Sandler while I was during the whole time with this. And Alan's like, oh yeah, I saw that footage. And I was driving my car, and I said, excuse me? Yeah. And he goes, yeah, I saw it. I said, no, wait a minute. Are you talking about, what are you talking about? Let's clarify this. I pulled the car to the side of the road. I'll never forget this. I was in Stinson Beach, California. Pull the car to the side of the road, and what I do, I said, so you're telling me that you saw footage of a UFO landing and the occupants getting out? Yes, I saw that. He said, Paul Schartle showed it to me at such and such base back in 1972 or 73, whatever it was. And I said, well, what about Emenager? Bob Emenager. He goes, no, Bob didn't get to see it. He didn't come in that day. It's when they were filming this piece. And they had kind of the go-ahead from, I don't want to go too down a wormhole here, but they had a bit of a go-ahead green lit from that guy, Colonel Coleman, who was at the Pentagon Public Relations, and he was the one green lighting this whole project. And so I guess this guy at Norton Air Force Base, Paul Schartle, assumed that it was okay to show him this footage. He did. Anyway, he told me that he's shown the footage. And as soon as the higher-ups found out that he'd been shown the footage, he said it was a real saucer, no question in his mind. He thought that maybe it was one of ours. He didn't really know. And they talked about the beans. He wasn't sure if it were he didn't know.
So do you think you can get it?
No.
No, gone for
No,
good.
no,
Gone
I
for
don't.
good.
I mean, wouldn't everybody let? I mean, that's the Holy
Yeah.
Grail, right?
Yeah, right.
But I do believe that Alan saw it. He
Yeah.
would have been in a position to have seen it. I do believe that Emenegger believed that that was authentic footage. Look, I was investigating a UFO landing that happened at Socorro, New Mexico, which is a stone's throw right around that same time from Holloman Air Force Base, and that was a close encounter of the third kind. So it's conceivable that a similar incident happened at Holloman Air Force Base and was filmed. But so hopefully that answered your question. I know I could go on and on for days on that
one. It's a
one,
tough one to
man.
answer.
Yeah.
So hey, this one is from Brodom, 93. Hey James, love the phenomenon. Do you believe the world may come to terms with the phenomenon on a large, widespread scale by whatever means at some point in our livable future? And do you have any humanly existential fears regarding the phenomenon or undeniable disclosure?
No, it is, the phenomenon is what the phenomenon is, whether we understand it or not, right? So if it's here to do us harm, we would have known that a long time ago, in my opinion. And so people are like, do you have trouble sleeping at night? Are you worried about this reality? I'm like, no, I'm not. It is what it is. So in terms of government disclosure, if that's what he's asking.
In our lifetime.
In our lifetime, I mean, we've had a level of confirmation with this recent. I know a lot of people feel like it's a big nothing burger with this assessment that came out in June 25th, but it actually isn't a big nothing burger. It's intelligence agencies basically saying these things are real. We don't think they're the Russians. We don't think they're Chinese, and they're not us. So you can kind of fill in the blanks. That's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, I thought it was a big deal.
You have to keep the pressure on. As much as I talk to people about the fact that I'd like to kind of kick my feet up and spend a little more time with my son because he's getting older. He's 7 now, but I feel like now is not the time to let off on the throttle. Right. So I'll keep at it.
Next question is from Coolness 104, and they ask. And this is the Wilson David memo. I don't know what that is. Wilson David memo. Based on everything you have heard, off the record, background, etc., do you believe this document is real and based on real events? And if you know what that
I know.
is, if you could educate both of us.
Yeah. So trying to give you the truncated version of this. It's a Davies memo. Basically, it describes recovered debris, a crashed disc. If the document is real, which I believe it is, and it came out of Edgar Mitchell's archive and actually walked itself out of his house. Edgar Mitchell was the sixth man to walk on the moon, Apollo 14. And I'm friends with his goddaughter, Antares, who happens to be making a film on his life right now. And she said that somehow that document was in his archive after he died. Somebody walked it out of his house, and that's how it went public. I'm pretty sure that's how it went public, according to my contacts, and that it is a bona fide, legitimate document. I don't know if Davies has confirmed it or not, but I do believe it's legitimate, and I don't think there's any question that the document is legitimate. And there's been more talk recently, surprisingly, even in the New Yorker, and they interviewed even Senator Reid talked about recovered debris, like it's quite remarkable. And you'd think that these people would say, oh, no.
Yeah, right.
But they don't. They're like, well, I've heard those rumors too. And we're trying to figure out where this stuff would be kept and where it's at, kind of thing. Yeah. So, anybody who's looked into Roswell, that Roswell happened. I mean, and they got that stuff somewhere.
Well, okay, on to the next one. This one, and
hopefully I answered that okay.
Yeah. Out of this one is from Luda Musa. And the question is, out of all the sightings and incidents featured in your documentaries, which one stands out to you as being the most credible and undeniable encounter?
Good question.
Credible and undeniable.
I would have to say I love all the sightings that we featured. I wouldn't have featured them in the phenomenon, and there was a lot of stuff that didn't make it in there. But if I had to select one, Dave Fravor, Nimitz, 2004, off the coast of San Diego, because of the caliber of witnesses, the Navy fighter pilots. And because it's confirmed with radar and photographic evidence, that is an incredibly compelling
Is that the Tic Tac?
case. That's the Tic Tac, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what makes it? It's because of the credible witnesses, not necessarily the footage, but the witnesses themselves.
The witnesses, it's Navy pilots, and it's been confirmed from the Navy themselves. It's a legitimate object that they don't know what it was, and it was captured on film. It was captured on radar. It was seen visually for several minutes. He chased this thing, and and it's interesting because when that whole story came to light, I was 5 years into investigating the landing of. It's probably the most well-documented UFO close encounter of the third kind when witnesses mention beings associated with the craft. I was investigating the 1964 UFO landing incident in Socorro, New Mexico with police officer Lonnie Zamora. And he described it as an egg. And I'm thinking to myself, I wonder when Tic Tacs came out. Because if Tic Tacs were around in 1964, would he have called it a Tic Tac?
Yeah, right.
Because,
looks a lot like.
Yeah, it was kind of funny, I was like, oh, he's calling it a Tic Tac, he's calling it an egg. Yeah.
All right. So on to our next question. And this one is from, these are hard to see. Normello Pomelo, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know anyone, yourself included, that has signed non-disclosure agreements for extraterrestrial or UFO related information? Why do you think that it was required? And then someone adds, maybe more specifically, what do you know about the nature of these NDAs? Do they differ by era or branch of the military? Do people with NDAs fear prison or disestablishment in their careers? Or do folks actually fear for their lives and families?
I'm not well versed on the NDA agreement. I mean, I have interviewed military personnel that have signed stuff. The incident at Rendlesham Forts, December 1980. There were a number of witnesses that involving that case that said they signed non-disclosure agreements, for sure. That's definitely done. I don't know what agency does that. I'm not entirely sure, but I mean, and I've heard that if you violate your National Security Act, or if you violate national security, that you can be put in prison. And I've had military witnesses say they feared that. Yeah. In terms of like people saying that their lives were, I've only heard that regarding the Roswell incident, and I heard it firsthand back in 1997 when I was at the 50th anniversary of the Roswell incident, from a couple of the witnesses said that not only. I'm just telling you what they told me. I'm not saying I believe it or I don't believe it, but they told me this, and I could see in their eyes they really, they were serious. Yeah. That they would not only be picking their bones out, but their family's bones too out of the desert.
That's terrifying.
So that I did hear, but I haven't heard anything like that recently.
All right. So then we had another question that related to another one, so we're going to skip over that because you already answered it. All right. So this one is from Pray Tome. Hey James, thanks a ton for doing this. I heard you recently on that UFO podcast taking your new documentary on the Brazil case. Sorry, I screwed that up. Talking about your new documentary on the Brazil case. I've seen several accounts of the story alleging that an officer that interacted with one of the beings,
Marco Teresi,
became very sick and died.
Mm-hmm. Interviewed his sister.
After that, is there evidence of this being true, or is that just internet speculation?
No, there's evidence of it being true. I interviewed Martha, his sister. We interviewed the doctor who worked on him. And he had this oily substance that was on his skin, according to his sister. And he got rubbing alcohol. He was trying to rub it. He was trying to get it off. It was this weird, oily, and it smelled really bad. And he apparently, and we have the contact information of the guy who was actually driving the police car that night. There were security, military police. Marco Teresi was only 23, 24 years old. He was a young, strong, healthy guy. And according to the witnesses, according to what we know, Marco Teresi, of course he's dead, so he can't confirm this, but Marco Teresi handled one of these creatures. He didn't know it was ET. He didn't know what it was. He was given orders.
What do you mean?
He grabbed it and he saw it in the street. It was feeble. It couldn't move very well. They weren't doing. Wow. The eyewitnesses that I spoke to said these things were not a threat. They were feeble, like they were struggling, and they were oily, brown skin, no hair, big eyes. Yeah, and he apparently handled one of these. He put it on his lap, and they drove it to the hospital. And he had this oily stuff all over his skin, and then he had a systematic immune system failure, and he just The doctor said he was doing everything he could, and he died.
Wow, there's more in your movie, I imagine.
Oh yeah, no, I've been there 3 times. I'm going there again in a couple of weeks.
That's insane. Well, and then the person
You'll believe these witnesses are very credible. I would not be wasting my time on this story if I didn't think there was something to it.
Well, and then they add, is there a place to purchase the shirt, the Phenomenon T-shirt you were wearing?
Oh yes, yeah, we have a handful of those. It's the Phenomenon Film. Let's see, thephenomenonfilm.com.
I better get one.
Yeah, if I had one here, I'd give it to you. I've got some. Yeah.
This is probably a really impossible question to answer. In your opinion, what is the long-term goal of the phenomenon?
You know,
I assume
I think this
not
is
the movie. They assume everything else, right?
You know, obviously this is total speculation, but based on people conversations that I've had with people that would generally be in a position to know, the phenomenon seems to be kind of a beat ahead of us, constantly just a little bit ahead of us. It's an intelligence that, according to Jacques Vallée, and I believe him, that they have a sense of humor. This intelligence, it's a sort of omnipresent intelligence that can manifest itself in a multitude of ways. Technological, it's also psychic. It's possibly around us all the time. It could be in slightly another dimension. Who knows? It's, like I said, I don't know. It's speculation. But what is the overall objective? I just have no idea.
Yeah.
And would they reveal themselves overtly? I mean, you don't just look at what they do, you look at what they don't do. All they have to do is hover over the Macy's Day Parade and it's game over. They don't do that. They've done some pretty overt stuff, but, you know.
Yeah. Do you think some of that overt stuff is unintentional? I think it's actually, I think they're just as fallible as humans?
No, I interviewed a general in Belgium, General de Brouwer. And he said to me about, there was a wave that happened in Belgium in the late 80s, early 90s, massive triangular shaped objects, size of football fields. And they would, according to him, they scrambled military jets to intercept and all that stuff. But they would shoot beams of light down at the ground, you know, and they would float over these cities in Belgium, just float really silently. Yeah. If you didn't look up, you wouldn't know it was there. That's how quiet they were. But he goes, they had lights on them, so they wanted to be seen. Yeah. He said that. He was like, they clearly wanted to be seen. Why would they have lights?
This is my own question. Have you seen the big triangle in the clouds over where was it? Shanghai. Have you seen that one recently?
No, I have not.
That's insane. You should see that.
Really? Yeah,
I'll send that to you. That's great. But so let's go on to the next question from July Altia, and I'm trying to keep track. My count may be off. I'm hoping with much of the crew and narrator behind the phenomenon returning for your next film, what can we expect from the Roswell of Brazil? And I didn't pronounce it because I want to screw up the name.
Varginha.
Okay,
yeah. Well, obviously, you know, I'm going there for a month. I could do all my interviews, my follow-up interviews in a couple of weeks, but I'm staying there for a full month because what happens is when I get to the village, people will find out I'm there and word of mouth will get out. And I know there's evidence. I know there's photographic evidence. And I'm going to do everything in my power to get my hands on it. I mean, is it a guarantee? Absolutely not. There have been very compelling documentaries done on Roswell with a lot less evidence. I mean, Roswell happened in 1947. I guess the first, the 90s, 50 years later. Well, this was a fairly recent case. I mean, this happened in 1996. So most of the key witnesses are all alive. Wow. We have some military that we're meeting with there. They're going to have their faces blurred out. We're aware of some evidence. I would say the best case scenario, I got a couple of interviews with a few generals. One is Brazilian Air Force and the other one's Brazilian Army. Say some fairly compelling stuff. I'm going to try to get my hands on some documents. Any photographic evidence would be a top priority. We'll see what I can do.
What's their motivation to lie? I mean, there's no.
I'm knocking on doors when I'm there. These guys aren't looking for me. I'm looking for them.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's fascinating. I'm fascinated by this story.
It's a. I didn't believe it when I first heard about it.
I know you didn't.
I really didn't. Right. I was like, come on, man. Like these beans. And then I met the witnesses, and a lot of the witnesses. You can go downtown Varginha in the town square and walk around and talk to random people that live there. Yeah. And they either have a cousin that knows, or they're this person, or they saw the military activity. The whole military surrounded the entire town.
Yeah.
Because these beings were walking loose.
That's insane. All right, next question. And one of the reasons I think people respect you a lot is because you do retain that skepticism until it's proven to be.
Yeah, I mean, I can't.
That's a respectable thing, I think, about your work, I think, is that you maintain that level until it's undeniable.
Yeah, and I also feel like I can never say definitively what it is, right? You can say what it isn't, but, let the audience fill in the blanks.
I like that. All right, did anyone and this is from Noise Style, that's funny. Did anyone from the government reach out to you before, after, or during the making of your movie? Did they push you in a certain direction or inquire about your content? Amazing movie, by the way. Thanks.
So I had no government intervention at all. I edited the film in a shack that had no running water. I'm not kidding. It was on a dirt road.
Yeah.
No internet, no toilet. We all had our special area in the yard where, not for, but the number one, but we'd joke about it. It's like, hey, that's my tree, and people would say it was supposed to be a temporary spot because I couldn't find a space in my house was tiny. I had a 550 square foot house. And so when I had people come working with me, it made such an impact on my family that I had to find another spot, and it was going to be a temporary spot, but I found this little shack, and so we edited this thing completely independently, not in Hollywood, in Northern California, on the end of a dirt road. Jacques Vallée would jokingly say, okay, I'm coming out for the weekend. I got my face paint, my compass, I got my bear spray, because we're out in the country, and it's like down this dirt road, and then we get to this place, and there's no running water. It's like,
but no one found out you were doing this, and they came to you and said, "What are you up to?"
Nope.
Yeah.
No. Whether they did it without me knowing, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
We had a couple of weird things happen.
Yeah.
We did have a couple of weird things happen with some. I can't really talk about it, but. A couple things where you went, I think we're being watched a little bit.
Yeah, right.
Just a couple of things. Yeah.
Well, all right.
I'm pretty public though, so they know what I'm doing.
This one's from Shifted Reality, and we're almost at 15 questions. Hey James, thanks for taking the time to answer some questions here. The phenomenon single-handedly shifted my point of view of this topic from crackpot conspiracy theory to entirely plausible. Hence my username of Shifted Reality. My question. Within the last couple months, a handful of influential public figures have claimed they received private outreach by allegedly highly credible individuals regarding disclosure. Sam Harris, Eric Weinstein, Terry Virts, I don't know who that is, and Jimmy Church. Sam Harris expounded the most on what was said to him. Essentially, start getting your head around how you'd like to tell your audience about the reality of non-human presence on Earth. Have you received such outreach? And are you aware of other individuals that have?
I have not received such outreach at all by anyone in the government. No, I'd like to, but I'd be highly dubious if someone did, because I don't believe. I'm actually pretty skeptical, believe it or not. Like I'm highly dubious of, like, if some government agency started feeding me some photographic evidence, I would assume that it's fake, because it's a great way to discredit somebody's. Like, all you got to do is, like, me start putting that stuff out. Like, hey, check this out. And then it's, like, all fake. And guess what? My credibility is shot.
Right.
So all the stuff that I put forward, I know the source. I talk to the source directly, like the witness, even the photograph I did of that famous case in 1966 in Westall in Australia, outside of Melbourne, that now infamous landing case that was witnessed by 300 plus students and the teachers. Crazy case. We featured in the movie. There was a photograph of the UFO. Every time you get an incident like that, or Rua, or Phoenix Lights, or Bentwaters, it's always over several night periods. There'll be like a week long or 2 weeks long of activity, and then it'll culminate with some big event. And that UFO was picked up most likely on a Polaroid camera, and we got to interview I featured the photograph.
That was really interesting.
I featured the photograph. He'd never gone on the record ever. I could bore you to death until the sun comes up tomorrow morning with how we got that guy to go on camera. But in any case, no government officials that haven't pulled me aside, none of that.
So That was an interesting answer. So
No.
Madcap says, "Are you a nuts and bolts UFO guy? Are you to believe, or do you believe something less material is involved?" I imagine that's a question about another dimension. Do you believe that these things are? I'm just assuming what
Well, I
this
look at
question is.
yeah, I look at the Socorro incident, and that's nuts and bolts.
Mhm.
Then I look at the incident with Dave Fravor about this object going to his cap point, first flying rings around his jet, and then it went to his cap point, which is the predetermined Latin launch that they only know. And he said it made the hair on the back of his neck stand up because that object was reading his mind. It was like a psychic kind of thing. So I think it's both.
Yeah.
But I can't prove anything that I'm telling you right now.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's all.
I wish I
it's-
could.
yeah. All right, so this one is from Reddit Schmidt. We're on the last 5 of these, so we're
Okay.
almost through this. You can go back to your life as it was before. So Reddit Schmidt says, in your documentary, some of the children who claim to have interacted during the aerial school incident in '94 stated that they had thoughts about certain technology being bad and that we were destroying the planet. There's no doubt that we are severely impacting our climate to the point that we find ourselves struggling for survival. Is there any speculation as to why these beings seem to care enough to warn us about the harm to our planet, yet not enough to intervene beyond warnings to school children? Also, are there other examples of similar warnings from these beings in relation to our destruction of the environment? So I think really, how can you answer the first part, but the second part maybe you can. I don't know.
Yeah, you'd have to ask yourself. Well, I'll tell you. Excuse me. When I was editing that segment of the film, and we spent a lot of time, even though that Ruiz section is only, 12 minutes long, I've never spent more hours editing a segment in my life. We got hundreds and hundreds of hours into it. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because that message, I heard it over and over from the children. And at the time, the last several years in California, the trees and everything were on fire. And at one point, the sun didn't come up. It was like this whole sky was orange. It was apocalyptic feeling. And I'm hearing that message and I'm thinking, my God, are we living this now?
Yeah,
Is this happening? This whole,
certainly seems
it was terrifying. I was like, my God, this prediction was done in 1994 and it's exactly kind of what's happening. Australia was on fire, like Northern California. It's like fires in Oregon, and the Lake Powell's like drying up.
Yeah.
So why they would care to communicate with children, your guess is as good as mine. I couldn't tell you. But you don't forget the warnings with the nukes, the disabling of the nukes. That's like taking matches out of the hands of a baby. That is, how do you interpret that behavior with the military? Clearly, they have an interest in our nukes. Did the detonation of our nukes affect their reality if they're interdimensional? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. Did that trigger the modern day UFO wave? Because all of a sudden we're sitting in pools of gasoline with a pack of matches and, maybe. But I definitely noticed organically, and I talked about this before, Lance Mungia, this guy that we worked with a little bit, he's like, hey, James, we're doing all this archive sightings. And he's like, let's put this kind of into perspective and let's put a map on the wall and let's kind of put pinpoints and where are these different sightings. And we looked at it and we went, that's interesting. This is all around Trinity Site, all within a certain proximity to Trinity Site. Yeah. And that was when I was like, and I'd heard about the UFO nuke stuff, but anyway, but I hope that answered your question.
All right. So next one is from IU Extreme. Have you seen any footage that blew your mind that the public hasn't seen yet?
Yes, I have.
Can you share that?
I talked about the footage that I saw I was on Impulsive with, I talk about it at length. So you should go and check the Impulsive, Paul, come on, the young guys, the Impulsive.
I don't know who that is. I'm not a young guy. I'm older than you.
Yeah, no, it's, he just fought Mayweather. Logan Paul.
Okay.
Logan Paul. Look up James Fox on Logan Paul. Watch that episode. I talk all about the evidence that I saw that's never seen the light of day. It would take a lot of time right now for me to tell you, but I already did it in great detail. So check it out. And Logan Paul subsequently has confirmed that footage.
No shit.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll come out, if he's going to come out with it or not, but we'll see. He said, maybe I will, maybe I won't.
All right, so the next one is from Sam Canadian 33, and we're just got a few more to go here in the top 20 questions. Do you see the mainstream scientific community eventually igniting real public disclosure? Think Avi Loeb and the Galileo Project. Or do you think eventually the hardcore data from the military will leak and disclosure will evolve from there? And what do you think about Galileo Project first? What is your impression?
I'd have to be refamiliarized with that. But let me remind your audience that the government didn't release those tapes that ended up on the front page of the New York Times. That was Chris Mellon and Lou Elizondo and probably a few others working quietly behind the scenes to make that happen. Yes, they ultimately confirmed them, and I think they officially released them, made them public, or confirmed it. But all the other stuff that's been leaking out has been leaking out. They are not saying, you don't see anybody in the intelligence agencies that are currently not employed, they're still there, that are saying, hey, check out this high-res photograph we have. No, they're not doing that. So it's weird what's happening. It's like there must be some people that are up for it, but remember that probably for every person that wants this out, there's probably 5 that don't, because it opens up a can of worms for them. I'm sure that it's gonna be open up a flood of questions of which they probably won't have answers to, and also expose their vulnerabilities. Like, think about that for a minute. If you confirm all these unknown objects, and you say it ain't Russia, it's not China, and it damn straight it's not us, well, what's left? And then, if they don't know, which they probably don't, or maybe they know something, I don't know, that's still like kind of scary for, like people we pay to secure our airspace and everything else, and they're going to tell us we don't know what these things are or where they come from, what they want. Anyway, they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. But we'll see. Look, you can't put the genie back in the bottle at this point. So it's coming out. And I don't know what it's going to take to pry some of that evidence out of their hands. But I'll certainly keep the pressure on it, as will many others.
So I imagine this person, they're asking if there'll be a follow-up to the phenomenon. Do you consider your Brazil movie to be a follow-up?
No, it's a standalone one piece.
So do you think there could be a phenomenon too?
Sure there will be.
Like you think that'd be pretty.
I'm pretty sure there will be.
It's done pretty well. It's doing all right? Why not? So we have just 2 more, actually 3 more. So this is one you may like here. Lou was asked recently in an interview, if the public knew what you knew, what would the next week be like? And he said that if the public knew what he knew, the next week would be somber. He said it would require humanity to grow up and rethink our importance as a character on the cosmic stage. From everything you know of the UFO paranormal field, if everyone in the public knew what you know specifically, what would the next week look like?
Well, honestly, I don't really know that much. I mean, there are aspects of the phenomenon that I deliberately left out that are a little bit alarming, if true. And I felt the need to maintain a fairly neutral position, do it in increments. I remind your audience that this is my 4th and a half film on the topic, but it's my first film on the topic that I've introduced Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Again, that's when the witnesses report beings. And there's one thing between an unknown craft in the sky and beings on the ground. That's kind of a big deal. That's something else that none of the media has been talking about. Neil deGrasse Tyson has been talking about it. None of the media is addressing it. And they're like, could have been the Russians, could have been this, could have been some super secret thing. I'm like, you guys aren't even taking into consideration the fact that the very man who investigated UFOs in an official capacity for the United States Air Force for 22 years, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, categorized them into 3 categories. Close encounters of the first, second, and third kind. Third kind is beings. They knew that back in the 60s, in the 50s. No talk of it right now in the media. It's like, hello? Like,
The movie's going to change that, right? That's what
there's been a slow rollout that we're transitioning into a streaming platform right now. They're just trying to figure out which one we're going to go with, because Netflix is great, but they've got a wonderful footprint a large audience, but they're like Starbucks of the coffee. They just like kill all the other competition, and they want you all to themselves and nobody else. So, we'll see.
Right. So, and just two more questions. Are you working with Lou and Chris Mellon on any projects going forward?
I'm gonna have to do a big no comment on that one.
That's interesting. Good. That's a good one. That's going to get people talking right there. Good for you. And, okay. And what's the wildest thing? And what's the wildest thing about UFOs in your life? What inspires you? What's the wildest UFO sighting that you're?
My favorite case. My favorite case is I'd have to say 1994 Rua, Zimbabwe, aerial school.
Yeah.
Just because of the sheer volume of eyewitness testimony with children, the fact that the UFO had been seen in and around the area for several days before it chose a school to land in broad daylight with 100 people in the playground, 10:30 in the morning, whatever it was. It's like, wow.
That's crazy. Yeah.
The testimony from those children and then meeting with them 20 years later, and it's like etched in their brain. Like,
that's worth
like
watching your movie for that alone.
It's an incredible case. Incredible case. I want to thank Jamie for fielding this whole project and suggesting that I do it. And I appreciate each and every one of you, the moderators and everybody on Reddit, for your support and your enthusiasm and your interest in what I'm doing. So thank you.
All right. Well, that's it.
Yeah, great.
There's a whole bunch more online. We didn't have time. There were 300 questions.
Oh my gosh. Thank you guys. I can't get to all of it, but we appreciate that you guys reached out, and we'll do it again soon.
All right. That's good news.
Yeah.
Soon-ish, right.
Yeah, okay.